Back now on the Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about Republican messaging after President Trump's primetime address, Troy Mayor Ethan Baker. And it's always good to see you, Mayor Baker. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Of course, good to be here, Roop.
After this happened, you were actually on some international channels being interviewed about the president's address, people trying to make sense of what was the main message. And it sounded to me as though President Trump was, perhaps rightfully so or not, defensive. He was fiery, and he was posing kind of a picture of what he inherited from the Biden administration as being part of the reasons for holding him back.
Which is consistent with what he said for years. I mean, that is kind of his MO. And I think he actually often appears defensive when he's giving these kind of speeches, especially when he stays on teleprompter. And he did. He stayed on script, I think, for the most part, which was interesting, which the only thing he could vary was really his tone. And I think that led to a little bit more defensive posture. But clearly, he's campaigning. He's back to thinking, you know what, I'm not on the ballot in 2026, but his legacy is, and what he's able to do the last 2 years of his presidency will very much be determined by what happens during the midterm. So he knows, he's listening, obviously, to everybody around him saying, people are more concerned about the economy than a lot of the other things you're talking about. Let's talk about those prices. Let's talk about what he's referring to as affordability, that new word.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a big deal.
Well, it's interesting because this president just 2 weeks ago was basically saying the affordability crisis and these words are part of a Democratic hoax. And now he's recognizing affordability as an issue and saying, here's what I'm doing to fix it. What's up with the about face
there? I agree and I disagree. I actually don't think he's recognizing that it is a crisis right now.
Not a crisis, but an issue.
But I think he's saying things are more affordable now. So I almost think he's kind of playing a little bit of game there. But obviously, he's not going to say it's a crisis, to your point, but he's going to continue to talk about the things he's done, the things he believes have made things less expensive for us. And also, I will say, you know, the other part of affordability that people don't talk about is if an item costs more, another way to afford it is to make more money, right? So rising wages are going to help the affordability issue as well.
I do want to ask you from a messaging point of view, because you're a Republican, you serve as a nonpartisan role as mayor of Troy, but you're a conservative who also sees, you know, what President Trump could do to improve. Sure. One of the things that just strikes me is why these leaders come up with numbers that they know they're going to be fact-checked. Yeah. We fact-checked earlier some of the things that he had mentioned about inflation. That was false. He said something like drug trafficking is down 94%. He said there's going to be a 400% cut to prescription drug costs. That would mean that the government's paying you to take prescription drugs. I mean, a 100% cut would mean that it's zero. Yeah. So 400, he said 400, 500, 600%. Right. And I know that President Trump supporters will say, well, that's just the way he talks. Yeah. But shouldn't there be a uniform way in which a president talks that smacks of the truth? Yes?
Yeah, I think we all elected leaders, public servants, I think journalists, everyone should tell the truth. There should be a set of standards that we all abide by. And I think that is something that most people in this country really yearn for. I think the issue, though, is related to those numbers is, you know, politicians get away with that all the time. That's a sad reality of it, because they know if they throw out enough things, most people are going to catch some of it. And those same people aren't going to see the fact-checking that happens on the polls.
But Mayor Baker, what's sad to me is that when you look at what he's saying, so much of what he said is true. He's saying things like, look, the border was a mess under Biden and Kamala Harris. He was right. Yeah. They were letting too many people in. Right. He's helped seal that. That's a success story. Don't put a number to it. Say it's down. Move on. Sure. Talk about prescription drug costs and say we're going to reduce them greatly. Yeah. It just seems to me when you start putting numbers, that becomes the story, and it distracts from the message.
I think it becomes a story for some, and that is who he is. And you know, no one likes to justify that or apologize for it, but it is a reality of who he is. He always steps on his own message. So you're right. If he was just talking about the border, talk about the success that's there, but he goes on and talks about other things and kind of washes over some of those good messages that actually people are recognizing as a success.
No, certainly. And I also want to add, I think it's interesting that so many people who are, of course, supporters of President Trump will say that liberals are suffering from what they call Trump derangement syndrome, because there's an obsession with what President Trump is doing and saying. I would invite those same people to ask the question whether President Trump may be suffering from Biden derangement syndrome, because President Biden's been gone out of office for a year, and he mentioned him a half dozen times in his speech. This is now his Senate, his House, and his presidency. It's his responsibility, isn't it?
I would say it's his House and his presidency. The Senate's still controlled by the Democrats, so I don't know if it's his Senate. But sure, it is his presidency at this point. I think going into 2026, that is what he's going to have to face the reality of. And perhaps maybe that is part of the messaging that happened last night. Okay, let's show you what we've talked about for this past 11 months, what Biden did or didn't do, what Trump's been able to do. But now moving forward, this is what our focus is going to be. And there are some promising things. The prescription drug reduction in costs, that's a huge thing. I mean, TrumpRx.gov, maybe the name's not so great, but the reality is people will feel the results of that policy if it really goes into effect and can save money. And that's just another thing that will actually really stimulate them.
And one of the other things that will help stimulate the economy are the tax cuts that go into effect because of the big, beautiful bill. And that's something that he mentioned. But again, it's almost like leading with that would be a big part of the story, because that is good news, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I also think part of that is he knows he has a limited time with such a big audience. And these presidential addresses on network television, you can't do them every week. You can't cut in all the time. So you really got to get, he felt, I think he had to get as much out as he possibly could. To your point, that strategically might not have been the best thing. But you know what? He's going to do what he does, and he feels pretty good about it, I bet, today.
His supporters are probably saying right on. His detractors are saying, how could you? And journalists are doing what we're doing, which is sit here and say, what's true, what's not, let's make sense of it.
And maybe some independents in the middle moved a little bit toward seeing some of those numbers or hearing some of those things, which I think was their ultimate goal.
It'll be interesting to see how the independent movement continues its move and march forward into this election cycle. Ethan Baker, the mayor of Troy, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your perspective tonight. Still ahead, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles dishes to Vanity Fair, and it's got a lot of you talking. PR guru Matt Friedman weighs in on the reaction. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2.